I want to tell you why Tennessee's newest commitment is more than just a 3-star linebacker. Okay. So, what has Tennessee had to do in recruiting to compete with the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world? They've had to evaluate early. They've had to build relationships. They've had to offer scholarships in some cases too early. But this is where Tennessee is now, and it's way different from where they've been. They can say to a young man, and that young man who flipped his commitment from Wisconsin to Tennessee loves the Vols. And we're talking about 3-star linebacker Brenden Ains. Here was the knock on him when I was told over the summer, he's not big enough right now. Well, now his high school coach says he's 6'2.5", or 6'3" possibly, which probably means he's 6'1.5". But nevertheless, I've watched the guy play. He's filled out his frame. He's done whatever needed to be done in the offseason to get ready for his senior year and turn himself from an okay prospect to a very good prospect. We call them nowhere, somewhere, anywhere guys. He was not a nowhere guy. He had a Wisconsin offer, and he probably would have had more had he not committed in June. He's certainly not an anywhere guy. He couldn't just call up Kirby Smart and say, hey, I'm coming, and Kirby say, hey, I've got a scholarship for you. But he is definitely a somewhere guy. And Tennessee is able to sit back and watch these guys develop and then flip them. And that is something that they were not able to do on a regular basis previously under Josh Heupel. I'm just going to tell you, I've covered recruiting for a long time, and I watched a lot of his tape last night when he flipped. There are a lot of in-state guys, too, that I want to address, led by Cooper Mays, who is supposed to be too small, not big enough, and all that to be a top-flight SEC player. Well, he's a top-flight SEC player. I mean, he's an All-American center potentially this year. I think that you also, Caleb, and let's address your hatred of mid-state prospects. I think you also have to have this culture that bounces back from an Arkansas loss. I'm going to go back old school. And an argument that I used to hate. And Fred White, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. It's not a shot. You're from Georgia. You love Tennessee more than anybody. But it's good to have a good in-state base that when things get tough, they keep that culture going. Your thoughts on Tennessee picking up a 2025 commitment in Ains?
Well, to your point real quick about in-state guys, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we always talk about the biggest stars on the 98 team, but I think actually 70% of that team was from the state of Tennessee. And the leader of that team was Al Wilson for a specific reason. And guess what? Jeff Hall was a captain on that team, a kicker, because again, he was a big Vol guy. So that's a great point. And you can tell this is a guy who would have wanted to go to Tennessee all along, but Tennessee waited and then they flipped him. I think this is the type of guy, you're right, that Tennessee needs more of, because what they're really looking for with their linebackers right now are guys that have enough lateral quickness and enough intelligence to be able to stay in position against these defenses. Those two things together are key. Elijah Herring had the intelligence and he had the heart, but he didn't have the lateral quickness. So,
Agreed.
I mean, you know, it's...
And so far, Jeremiah Thielander and Keenan Pili have both surprised us with their ability to play sideline to sideline. I didn't know that Pili was going to be that good. And so far, I think Thielander's done a good job as he continues to get his feet wet.
Oh, I agree. So the question with this kid, because he was a Wisconsin commitment, and we know the Big 12 allows you to, not the Big 12, you're allowed to not have lateral quickness when playing in the Big 10. Is that fair to say, Dave?
It's very fair to say.
Yeah, and Wisconsin doesn't look for that. They look for the gym rat guys, the good, solid, fundamental guys that, you know, are going to stay in their right positions. And, yeah, that's what they're looking for. Does he have the lateral quickness? Because, again, Elijah Herring, also came from Nashville, did not have the lateral quickness. And you really don't know that until you see them in SEC play. So that's going to be the biggest question for Brenden Ains as he heads to Tennessee next year. I think Tennessee has like his development, so but we will have to see how that goes. That's going to be hard. That's going to be the hardest thing to gauge is his lateral quickness.
Let me interrupt for a second. I thought Elijah Herring, when he signed with Tennessee, was a big guy that was limited laterally, and probably back in the day they would have made him a defensive end. Okay, but he probably didn't want to do that, and they don't make moves like that like they used to because the transfer portal, you can just up and bolt. I think this guy is a guy that has all the athletic ability that you need, much like a T-Lander or a Peely. He's just got to stay big. He's just got to keep drinking the protein shakes. I love the protein, as the bros like to say in the gym. So, Caleb, I think comparing him to Herring is a little bit unfair.
That's fair. And also, his coach actually said that he's used as a bit more of a speed set the edge guy, which is a good sign for Tennessee then, because if you're a speed set the edge guy, then we're talking his lateral quickness may not be a concern at all. As a matter of fact, he's used more as in a role that could actually have him play Mike linebacker at Tennessee, which is crazy to think.
I've been told that he is projected to play Mike.
He is projected to play Mike? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the question then becomes, can he whip blocks from, you know what I mean? Because you know this game, Mike linebackers, you got to whip a lot of interior blocking to make plays in the run game.
Totally agree. Do me a quick favor. Look, I'm going to check what T-Lander is listed at right now on Tennessee's football roster. And can you check and see how big he was when he came to Tennessee? And give us 30 seconds so we can tell you about our friends at Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
T-Lander listed at 6'2", 238 pounds. Wowzers. I found it, in case you didn't, Tennessee signed him 6'2", 217 pounds. I think these guys are clones.
Wow, you think they're clones?
Yes. Now, T-Lander was from Georgia, so we could argue whether or not you'd want an in-state guy or you'd want to beat Georgia, but I don't think that Georgia truly offered him. Here's the other thing I want to give you a little bit of insight on, Caleb, because I've covered more recruiting than you can possibly ever imagine, is when a guy commits to Wisconsin, especially with the early signing day, these recruiting analysts are moving on. So they're not going to give out another star unless another school offers, unless there's some sort of news to be had. So I have no issue with him being a 3-star. By the way, just for frame of reference, T-Lander was listed as the 53rd best linebacker in the nation. Now, where do you think Ains was listed? 61st.
So we're talking, I mean, they are like very, very closely tied.
Yep. I think they got another T-Lander. I don't think you expect anything from him next year. But in 2026, you expect him to be ready to roll, especially because he's put on that weight in this offseason. I think it's a big
deal. All signs point to that, and you are right about that. And you're right. He's 6'2", so he has the right size. Again, he's used as the speed guy at his high school, which is a big deal. He's used to come off the edge sometimes, funny enough. The big question becomes, and this is always hard, Dave, can you maintain your lateral quickness when you put on that weight?
That's true.
And so because he's going to have to get to 240, because he's going to play, if he's going to play Mike linebacker, he's got to get to 240, right?
Yeah, 235. I would argue this, that I would much rather be in this position than with a Herring that already had the size and I didn't think had the quickness.
Hype will sign Herring as like his first, I think it was like his first ever recruit that he signed. It is or one of his first evers. He just didn't have, he had to get guy. I mean, this was when he took over in 21. He had to go get guys pretty much. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he had to get bodies.
Yeah. And also, I I also, as I said before, I think there's something to be said for having a presence in Nashville. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be great there, but I think they want to continue to do that. And the last thing you want is to let another Patrick Willis slip through the cracks. Remember when Tennessee didn't offer him, and he's gone on to be an NFL Hall of Famer. Oops.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy, and I think even crazier was that Patrick Willis. You would think, given the success that Tennessee had with Al Wilson and Jackson, Huntington area prospects, you would have thought they'd have gone after Patrick Willis a little harder, but.
No, they didn't just not go after him.
They didn't want him. Yeah,
they told him he wasn't fast enough. You can just step off and go to Ole Miss.
Well, I heard that he actually cried on his way home from a camp because he really wanted to go to Tennessee his whole life.
Yes,
and he was like crying because he was so sad that Tennessee didn't want him, and he had to be consoled about it. And,
yes.
You know, it was But I mean, look, you're going to miss some guys. There are some guys that you can't project, right? I mean, but Patrick Willis, was there even anybody on the staff that thought he was good?
Everybody but John Chavis.
Really? Everybody thought he was good but John Chavis?
Not even John Chavis.
You're kidding. I thought nobody. I mean, he went to Ole Miss. It wasn't like he got offers to like Georgia or Florida or Alabama or like elite programs.
Well, I'll be clear. I think that the fact that he was in state played into it too. Everybody wanted him but John Chavis.
That's wild. So this was a John Chavis miss.
So, a miss? I mean, it's one thing to missing a guy that goes and plays 3 or 4 years in the NFL. It's another thing to missing a guy that's in Canton, Ohio.
John Chavis still hasn't prepared for how to stop a quarterback draw, Dave. He was so focused on learning to teach guys to close gaps to stop a quarterback draw that he missed on evaluating Patrick Willis. Because it's a very complex thing, Dave. It's a very complex thing to learn how to stop a quarterback draw.
Who could have stopped a quarterback draw in that 2001 SEC championship game? How about Patrick freaking Willis?
Or how about this? You know what Patrick Willis would have done more than anything? 2006.
Tennessee win.
When Tennessee gives up the 4th and 1 to Tim Tebow in 2006, you know who would have stopped Tim Tebow and who was playing college football at that time? Patrick Willis.
And
by the way, they didn't even they dropped back in coverage on that play. Go back and look at it. Tennessee drops back in coverage. What do you think Tebow's in there to do?